Hello, hello. Welcome to another installment of What's New in Prisma. And this week, it looks a little bit different. If you were with us 2 weeks ago, we noted that Nico was going on sabbatical, and he has done just that. As of today, he'll be back in October. So today we have Daniel. Daniel Norman is joining me today for What's New in Prisma. Welcome.
Hey, Ryan.
How are you?
Very well.
Good. You have been extremely busy, as we all have, with lots of stuff going on in the Prisma world, like Prisma Day, which was actually 2 days of activity. And so we'll talk a bit about that today, recap it and what was going on. And of course, we've got a fresh new release this week. Prisma 2.26 is the latest release. And so we'll be going over that as well. But yeah, how's your week been all in all? I mean, you've been busy, but has it been good?
Yeah, I mean, Prisma Day was one of these, once in a year events that we prepare so much for. And it's lovely to see just the global Prisma community just come together and just show all the cool stuff that they're building on top of Prisma. And I think the audience really enjoyed Prisma Day. So that was definitely a huge, strong affirmation to the work that Prisma is doing, and just lovely to see the community.
Totally. Yep, absolutely. And of course, it's an event like most everyone is doing right now that is virtual because of the current situation in the world. And that, I think, gives a little bit of an interesting, scenario, because a lot of people around the world can join us. It's not something that's limited to just those who might be in Berlin or whatever, which is really cool. We got a lot of attendees. And this year, we opened it up in a neat way to be really widespread in languages. Do you want to talk a little bit, Daniel, about what we did with different workshops and the different languages that we supported?
Yeah, so I mean, the whole idea was to try to make this as approachable to anyone in any language, and I think we had about 11 languages for the practical introduction to Prisma. So I think we had Korean, Japanese, Chinese, English, French, Polish, Russian, Italian, Portuguese, and German. We also had Spanish initially, but that had to get rescheduled. And so that was the introduction to Prisma workshops. We also had one workshop that you ran together with Lee Robinson from the Versal team, which was getting started with Next.js and Prisma. We also had Mark Stammer-Johann, who's one of our community contributors. He's also a Nest.js contributor who did a workshop on building a REST API with Nest.js and Prisma. And finally, we had also WASP, and we had a Redwood workshop, and an application workshop, a Keystone workshop, and finally Blitz. So I think we've really just covered all of the different frameworks, in addition to like the introduction to Prisma that focuses mostly on like the Prisma layer.
Yep. Awesome. Yeah, it was definitely widespread in terms of languages, both spoken languages and language, I suppose, support, if you want to call it that, via frameworks. There's lots of stuff that we've got content-wise coming up as a direct result of Prisma Day that will be on our YouTube channel. So if you're interested in any of those topics, Prisma with X, these workshops are going to be on the Prisma YouTube channel, as well as the talks that were given. Talks were day 2, right? There was just workshops day 1, and then day 2, it was talks. Something I wondered about that, were you doing the emceeing, because the talks get pre-recorded, but the emceeing, was that live or was that pre-recorded as well?
Yeah, so the emceeing was live. Also, the Q&As were live.
Right.
So it was just the talks that were pre-recorded. And I think that sort of gives, the right balance between creating an engaging experience. All the speakers were hanging out in the public Slack. And so there was really like interaction. But the benefit, I guess, is that, you get the good quality videos that work, and you don't have all of the technical difficulties that can potentially arise when live streaming.
Very true. Yeah, live streaming talks, especially at the number that we had, can get a little dicey. It can get a little bit precarious in terms of like technical issues that might come up. So pre-recording is good. And one thing I was wondering about from your perspective, like your emceeing, I found has always been amazing, like super on point, like very, very clean, like really engaging and everything like that. Like, do you have a background in doing this? Were you an MC for high school events or something like that?
Absolutely not. This was completely new to me. I remember last year. So last year when I joined Prisma, we were organizing Prisma Day, and this was in the beginning of February. So when we started planning it, we thought it was going to be an in-person event, and then we sort of had to go digital, like online, and then I was asked, "Oh, would you be open to doing the emceeing?" And I was like, "Yalla, let's give it a go." And you know, that was sort of like my taste of it, and it's really been a fun journey, just learning both about Prisma, you know, like as a developer advocate, but also sort of like going into new territories with emceeing. So thank you. It's really nice to hear.
Well, that's great. Yeah, yeah, you're a natural. It really comes across very well. So keep it up if it's something you like, is what I would say. And before we get into the release notes for 2.26, maybe touch on a little bit of the event that you just wrapped up actually today. What were you up to today?
Yes. So one note that I wanted to make, last note about Prisma Day. So the talks will be uploaded, and also the workshops will be uploaded to YouTube, but it will take a couple of days, so you can expect that in the coming week. And yeah, and today we collaborated with Dubu Lab. This is a Korean agency that uses Prisma quite a lot, and they're really pushing the sort of the node.js community and the whole development community in Korea. So they organized a hackathon. And for that, they have this app called Hackatalk, which is a chat app. It's an Expo app, so there's an iOS and an Android version. And the backend for that is built with Nexus and Prisma, so it's a GraphQL API. And for the hackathon, they invited me to give sort of a bit of an introduction to Prisma, because the whole point of the hackathon is to sort of improve that app further. So I'll drop a link to the app, but it was just amazing to see like the whole Korean community just together in a Zoom room and talking about all things databases, Prisma, GraphQL, and all the good stuff that's happening in the ecosystem.
Nice. That's really cool. Yeah, that sounds like a lot of fun. I love that we can collaborate with people across the globe, especially because we do have users and people interested in so many corners of the globe. So great stuff. Daniel, thank you for that recap. I think what we'll do now, if you're up for it, is we can get into this release, 2.26. What do you think?
Yeah, let's do that. I think it's a release filled with a lot of good stuff, and I think you've prepared a really nice demo, so I'm super excited to see that.
Cool. I'm going to share my screen here. You let me know if this is coming through. I think so there it is there. I'm going to add it to the stream. Maybe you could take care of the positioning of everything, if you don't mind. And we will talk about this release, 2.26. You can find the release notes. It's tagged as 2.26.0 here on our GitHub. And this one is going to be great for anyone who has been requesting cascading deletes. This is kind of the biggest thing of this release is new support for possibilities for cascading deletes. It's not so much that cascading deletes solely are the new feature here at this release. It's really that like we've opened up fine-grained control, as you'll see here. Fine-grained control over referential actions is what they're called. So in this release, the preview feature, you may have become used to this now, that when there is something new, it's initially released as a preview feature. You access it in your Prisma schema in the preview features array here. It's called referential actions. So it's not something called like just strictly cascading deletes. And that's because this opens up the possibilities of Prisma being able to tell the database what to do with on delete and on update, these keywords here in your SQL. And so kind of how it works is if you've got relations, I guess maybe let's back up a little bit and talk about like what a cascading delete is in the first place for those who aren't familiar. Really, it's if you've got two tables that are related to one another. And the typical example that we give is like, say you've got a user and the user has posts. And say that there are many posts that exist in the database that reference back to the user who owns it. What happens when you go and delete that user? What happens to the post data? And so what you get with many SQL, many relational databases, is the ability to just automatically delete anything that belongs to the record. How should I say this? You can delete anything downstream, I suppose, is maybe one way to look at it. If a user gets deleted, automatically delete all of their posts, because that's not going to be something you need for that user anymore. The same kind of thing goes if you want to update something. Like if you wanted to update the ID for a user, you can cascade that update all the way through to anything owned in a relation, in this case posts, by that user. So this is the big thing in Prisma 2.26. You opt into it with referential actions. And there's a bunch of text here that I will strongly suggest that you read if you're going to be opting into this feature, because you'll want to understand the, it's a little bit, it gets somewhat complex here in terms of like what happens in various scenarios, especially with different databases. It's mostly the same, but there are a couple of little differences here. But what it looks like is this. You'll have your post model, and you will get your relation set up as you typically would. And now at this release, you can set these keywords up on delete and on update. And then you tell it what to do. In most cases, if you want cascading deletes, you would just say, I want it to cascade like this here. But there are other keywords as well. We've got cascade, restrict, no action, and set null. And the usage of these various actions is going to depend on what your scenario is specifically, and set default is was hiding down there. But these are this handful of actions that you can opt into, but you'll definitely want to check out the what is specific to your scenario. But most people are going to be interested in cascading deletes, so that's what we'll show today in our demo that I'll set up in just a second. But before we get to the next feature that we can talk about here that's new in 2.26, Daniel, any thoughts on cascading deletes or referential actions here?
Yeah, I mean, I think you covered it really nicely. I think it's worth mentioning that while in many cases you probably do want to use Cascade, there's obviously a lot of situations where you might want to prevent a lot of like cascading deletion, because I mean, imagine that you have three models: a user, a post, and say even a comments model. A single deletion of a user that has related posts, and those posts have related comments, can cause quite a few deletes. And so this is where you might want to start thinking about perhaps using some of the other options, because cascading can have quite a big, what they call blast radius, which is to say that, just deleting one thing can end up deleting a lot of things. So in general, this is a really nice feature, and it's worth also pointing out what it was like before. So prior to this preview feature, Prisma would generally prevent cascading deletes when you were deleting records or rows in your database using the Prisma Client API. And so this is quite a significant change. So you should be very careful and make sure that you test it before. But I think on that note, it's probably good to just jump into the demo.
Cool. Yep, we'll jump there. Thank you, Daniel. One more thing to note on this release just before we do that, though, is there is this new feature which might be interesting for you. It's more so interesting if you're starting a new Prisma project. So if you've got an existing one, maybe not such a big deal, but you can now pass this flag, data source provider, and you can specify which data source, which database you're using. So in this demo that I've prepped, I mean, I'm not going to do it again. I did it initially when I set it up, but I did this basically. I said I want SQLite as the database to use in this specific demo that I'm about to show. So it might be nice as you're setting up. I mean, it just saves you a step, I guess, when you go and change things up in your Prisma model. So check that out. What else? Node API improvements. We are in the process of kind of switching things over to Node API. You can read more about that here if you are interested in what this is all about. But we're encouraging people to opt into this as a preview feature. Check it out. Let us know if there are any issues that you encounter. Essentially, this is like a different way of communicating with Rust at the end of the day, the Rust engine. And it is going to be useful for hopefully for improving performance in some ways. And I think that there will be some benchmarks rolling out to see the speed boost that we're going to get. But we're encouraging people to opt into it and give it a shot. And please do let us know if you have any issues. Other than that, fixes and improvements, I'll let you take a cruise through this to check them all out. And that's, I think, about it for 2.26. So with that, let's check out what we've got for this cascading delete stuff. All right, so what have I got here? I've got a post model and I've got an author model. A post has a single author and an author has many posts. So this is kind of typical stuff you might see. And what I'm going to do, well, before I do anything, I'm actually going to, because I've been playing with this, I'll do npx Prisma db push just to get to my current state here of my Prisma model. And then what I will do is head over here to Prisma Studio. Let me just refresh this, make sure we're all good. I've got no data in here. I'm going to add a record. I'll add myself as the author. And then I'll add some posts. So let's add post one body. The author is me. So let's save that. Add another record. Post two body. Author is me. All right. So really minimal amount of data here. So what we essentially want to do is show what happens. We'll take the before case. Before you opt into cascading deletes, what happens when you go and try to delete a user that has data belonging to that user through a relation? Let's take a look at that scenario. So I've got server.ts here. I've got Prisma clients, and I've got this main function. And so what you might try before even getting into cascading deletes is something like this, where you do await Prisma author. I want to delete an author. Delete where the ID, and let's grab that author ID. Author ID is here. Just hard code this in for this example. There's author ID. All right, and then if we run npm run dev, what we get is we are blocked from doing so. So the change you're trying to make would violate the required relation between author and post. So that is no good. Basically, Prisma historically has just stopped you from doing this. But now what we can do is we can come into our Prisma schema. We can say, give us the preview feature called referential actions. So again, it's called referential actions. It's kind of why, you know, the all-encompassing set of referential actions that we've got. And one of them is on delete, where we can pass cascade to author. So when you make that change, you'll come over and npx Prisma db push. You got to migrate your database again, because this puts information into your database about how to handle these actions. And now, if we want to delete our author, npm run dev to run that function, we are done. We've got this succeeding. If we refresh here, author is gone and the posts are gone as well. So there you have it. There's the scenario before. You'll get blocked from doing so. And in this case, you will, if you cascade the deletes, it'll delete related data. But be aware of that blast radius that might occur if you have many related tables, many related models. That can be a thing. That can be an issue. One thing I will say is, I was trying out some of the other actions here, and if you try, I guess it depends on how your data is set up. But for example, right, let's go and create another record here. First name, last name. Just create one post in this next case. Post one, post body. Me. Oops. And save that. Yeah, there are, we noted here in the notes, the release notes, there are these different actions. So where did they go? Here we go. So possible keywords for on delete and on update are cascade, restrict, no action, set null, set default. So I was checking out set null, for example, what that would do, but it just errored out. And I wasn't too sure if that's the expected behavior. Maybe it's database specific.
Oh, yeah. It probably would error, and that is because the author ID field, this relation scalar field, is required. So if you make that optional, it should work.
True. Yes. So yeah, let's try that. That's optional there. And this is not.
And also the author ID.
Oh, author ID. Yes. Thank you.
Yeah.
Typically here you are going to need this to be present, in this specific data model. If I was making an app that a blogging application, a post has to have an author, right? So you have to have it specific to your actual data model and your data needs. But just to show the possibility, let's take a look. Push that, and then if we grab this new ID, author, here it is. And we go to server TS, put it in there. So we're going to delete. So let me see. We've got on delete is set null. We've got this optional. Let's see what happens. npm run dev. Done. So we didn't get any error there. Author is gone. Post, author ID null. There you have it. So your post still exists, but no author. So I don't know, like, there may be some scenarios where, like, if something gets deleted, that is related to something else, you want to keep maybe those downstream objects, those downstream records, for whatever reason. In most cases, like in this scenario, you'd probably want to, I'm thinking of the WordPress example specifically, for those familiar with WordPress. When you go to delete an author or a user who has existing posts related to them, WordPress will ask you who to attribute those existing posts to, or what you want to do with it. And therefore you kind of have to do something. You have to attribute them to somebody. So this is very contextual, obviously, for what your data model needs might be. But that is a quick tour of how you use cascading deletes. So check it out. It's on delete. And then on update is the other one that we've got. You can cascade your updates. So this would be the example. If you updated the ID for an author, it would then go and propagate those ID updates to any posts that the author would have. That is the deal with that. So yeah, hopefully that gives you a kind of quick example of how all of this works. And with that, I'm going to stop my screen and we can move right along. Any other thoughts, though, before we do, Daniel? Anything you wanted to mention on cascading deletes?
Yeah, I mean, just the one thing is that if you have feedback, we have an issue for this, so I'll drop a link to that. But we're always eager to hear your feedback about these. And so if you try it out and there's something that sort of an issue that you run into, feel free to share your feedback, or if you think the design could be implemented otherwise.
Awesome. Yep. We appreciate any feedback you have got. And this one specifically, like if you're opting into this, and I think there was a note in the release notes here that when you go to opt into this with an existing database, like please do read through the notes and really understand like what will happen for different actions and stuff like that, just to make sure your database is, is safe from any destructive actions that you may not be intending and that sort of thing. But yes, there it is. So, this is a relatively short What's New in Prisma today. We're kind of almost at the end of it here. We can take questions. If anyone has questions, we are happy to answer them. And I'm looking through the comments here to see if there's anything we can talk about right now.
Yeah, I saw we had a really interesting question, but it was quite from German, who asked, what is the correct way for working with the same schema in multiple DBs? So DBs sharing schema. Can we avoid the generation of multiple clients? And this is something that I'm really curious to hear more about. So if you have, say, two databases and they have the exact same schema, I'm wondering, is this basically a scenario where you have two environments, like a staging and a production environment, or are these two separate applications? So I'm really curious if essentially you want to interact with these two databases that have the same schema, but using a single Prisma client. That would be currently not possible. You would have to basically generate two separate Prisma clients and import them separately. But I'd love to hear more. And if you have any thoughts on this, Ryan.
Yeah, and maybe the scenario here is, and I've thought about this too, is if you want to have like a multi-tenanted application that instead of sharing the same database, you want to have separate databases for each tenant. Which, that's something that I've thought a lot about in the past. And I've kind of resolved at this point. I've never actually done separate databases per tenant. I've thought about going down that road, but now I'm glad I didn't. And I've resolved now to not go that route in the future, because just from feedback that I'm hearing from Soren, in fact, he's given good feedback from his experience talking to his friends in the industry that have been through this with separate databases, that it can be a mess. Like it can be hard to manage. It can really be challenging to manage data through separate databases, especially when it comes to maintenance and all that. You change one thing in one spot, and then you got to change it in all the other spots, and that sort of thing. So I think the solution that I've always used and that I will, I think, continue to use with some refinements is just to get a really good. Really far upstream, get a really good sort of access pattern such that you're restricting any database queries to the viewer, right? So whoever the tenant is that is coming in to request data, you just make it very difficult, essentially, for any queries to be made to cross the tenant boundary, essentially. You want to kind of scope down database request, database access to the given tenant, whoever's viewing the database at the time. And that's what I've typically used in the past, and it's worked out just fine. So
just in case some of our viewers are not familiar with the term multi-tenant, I think it's worth clarifying. So, for example, assuming that you were a company like Stripe and you had multiple customers, you would potentially consider each one of your customers who has an account with Stripe as a tenant. Is that the way that you think about it too, Ryan?
I suppose, yeah. I think about it in terms of like, you'll have. I suppose most SaaS applications, when it comes down to it, you could define them as multi-tenants, right? It's like an account would be considered a tenant. But like it's a blurry line, I think. Like, and a lot of people have different opinions about exactly what multi-tenant means. And this is where it gets blurry, especially too, considering like whether you separate databases, like actual databases themselves. Some people will tell you, for example, thinking about like authentication stuff, that let's say you're using JSON Web Token authentication, and you have like very, very simple JSON Web Token authentication where you've got a secret key and you're using HS256 as your algorithm to verify your token, to produce your token and then verify it. Some people would argue that it's not a multi-tenant application unless you have a different secret key per account. Right. So you can't just get away with like one secret key, verify everybody. You actually have to produce a separate one per account and handle that in your application stack. So there's that. There's the database issue. So this, even for me, like the lines here are very blurry. I don't really know like how to define it properly. And yeah, so it's difficult in that way. But I would say, like, on the whole, most SaaS applications, are going to be multi-tenant by their nature.
I mean, the idea is basically you have an application that you're building, and you want that to serve multiple customers or users, and you want to draw some kind of safe boundaries between them so that one user's data doesn't impact someone else's data. And that's on the database layer, as you mentioned, right, with this having this like tenant ID perhaps in a lot of your database entities. And then also what you mentioned about authentication, that's like in a different layer. You also want to draw a boundary and make sure that the tokens that were signed with one key for one customer or user don't apply. I mean, you have basically a boundary and a different sort of secret. Yeah.
You bet.
No, gotcha.
Yeah, so it can be a tricky one. There's different opinions, that's for sure. But yeah, thank you for your question, German. We have another one here. Where can we see the Getting Started with Next.js and Prisma webinar? So that was the workshop that I did for Prisma Day on Tuesday. That will be coming up on the YouTube channel in X number of days. That's what we can say, I guess. We don't exactly know when it will be posted, but it'll be
hopefully
soon.
Within the next week.
Yes, hopefully in the next week. So stay tuned for that. Yeah, I had a lot of fun that webinar, that workshop with Lee. We had some good discussions as well during the workshop about stuff related to Next, kind of the inner workings a little bit. How to think about server side rendering versus calling directly from the client, that sort of stuff. So definitely check it out. All right, so
have you, by the way, followed the recent updates with Versal and Next.js? Anything interesting that you think is worth sharing?
Well, they just did their big raise, right? Their big fundraising, which was what, $102 million, something like that?
Yeah, something big.
It was a big one. And yeah, it's really cool to see what they're doing. Like I was just reading, I think it was a tweet from like their primary investors saying that the kind of growth that they're experiencing is just kind of never seen, really. Like, it's websites within the top 10,000 websites in the world are like many huge brands are using Next.js now, which is very cool. So I am excited for that. I love Next.js, so I'm excited to keep working with it and for their continued success. Yeah, so we had another question just quickly about the workshop. That's going to be on YouTube in the coming week, hopefully. And thanks for answering that there in the the chat. Okay, so I think, questions, I think that's it as far as I can see. And maybe we can talk just a little bit about upcoming talks. Do you want to mention something about MongoDB Live?
Yes, so some of you may have heard that we've launched a couple of months ago the early access program for MongoDB, and many of you have signed up and have already provided us with some really useful feedback. I also wanted to announce that MongoDB Live, which is the yearly MongoDB conference, is happening on the 13th and 14th of July, and I'll be giving there a talk titled Making MongoDB Type Safe with Prisma. And that will be a talk exploring some of the reasons for introducing this concept of type safety into your work with MongoDB. And so I'll drop a link to that. And yeah, if you're a MongoDB user and you're interested in using Prisma with Mongo, I highly recommend that you check that out. The conference is free, so you just need to sign up online, and you should be able to get that. And that's pretty much it in terms of upcoming talks. Yeah, I think that pretty much wraps it up. And
excellent. Great. Well, yeah, we finished early today, about half the normal time, which is just fine. So I think, yeah, if anyone has any more questions, feel free to hit us up. We're on Twitter, twitter.com/Prisma, or GitHub. You can find us there, /Prisma on GitHub as well.
And be sure to hit that subscribe button. That way you'll smash that subscribe button, so you'll get notifications for any upcoming talks and live streams that we're going to have in the future.
Yeah, that would be much appreciated. YouTube is where we want to put a lot of attention to, because it's a great outlet for education, and it seems to be that it's well appreciated there. So if you are interested, if you're a YouTube subscriber type person, feel free to subscribe to us. With all that said, I think we can wrap it up. Daniel, thank you so much for being here today, and for sticking it out through all the busyness you've had this week. And yeah, I will chat with you offline.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Take care, everyone.